Oh, Denzel said to me a few minutes ago, he said, at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you.
Hollywood rumor mills are spinning with a sensational what-if scenario. The idea that even the famously composed Denzel Washington could snap, allegedly confronting Will Smith in a heated backstage moment fueled not just by anger, but by a sense of betrayal. In this whispered narrative, the same man who once prayed over Will after the Oscar slap finds himself shoving him against a wall and demanding answers after discovering something that makes him question whether his loyalty was misplaced and whether he'd been pulled into a scandal so murky it has even longtime insiders stunned into silence.
You seemed a little dazed afterwards.
No, I was gone, dude. You know, that was a rage that had been bottled for a really...
Gossip circles have jumped on a wild rumor that escalated almost overnight, claiming that during award season chatter, whispers spread that even the unflappable Denzel Washington supposedly snapped at Will Smith, not just in anger, but in a feeling of personal betrayal after once offending him and even praying with him following the infamous Oscar slap. Clips of Denzel talking about that moment, invoking spiritual warfare and asking, "Who are we to condemn?" have resurfaced across social media, repackaged as if to imply regret, with narrative spinners suggesting he now believes he vouched for someone playing a deeper, darker game, turning what once looked like Big Brother Grace into a cautionary tale.
Violinist is suing Will Smith, claiming retaliation after he alleges that he was fired for reporting harassment while on tour with Smith. Brian King Joseph filed the lawsuit in California earlier this week, accusing Smith of deliberately grooming him for exploitation.
Online gossip has been spiraling into overdrive, with people stitching together headlines, lawsuits, commentary, and half-baked theories into one giant narrative that casts Denzel as a mentor who supposedly regrets vouching for Will Smith, while also dragging in various legal filings and public disputes that some commentators are using, fairly or not, to imply darker undertones. In reality, the only factual part is that certain legal documents and complaints exist, but the internet has turned those filings into fuel for fan speculation, viral podcast clips, and meme-laden connecting that no lawyer or court has ever confirmed. And that's precisely why the alleged Denzel vs. Will storyline has taken on almost mythic proportions online. Not because anything concrete has been proven, but because rumor culture treats possibility as entertainment and turns whispers into a cinematic saga.
Traction and false defamatory statements. This is from the Hirsch, Litchison, Young, and Polk.
This letter is filled with a bunch of lies and falsehood. In that letter, it says that
this office represents Willard C. Smith II. It has come to our attention that you recklessly and maliciously spread out white lies about our client and his wife in an interview published on or about November 8th on YouTube and again November 14th on 2023 interview on Instagram. In each of these two interviews, amongst an avalanche.
In this expanded gossip narrative, the only documented pieces are that Denzel once spoke about Will Smith's Oscars incident in spiritual terms and that a lawsuit involving a touring musician exists, but the internet has filled in the rest with speculation, podcast chatter, and insider-style whispers, ranging from claims that a former assistant plans to reveal more information, to social feeds stitching unrelated rumors about Will's marriage, memoir revelations, and past relationships into one. Sprawling theory about a so-called fracture in Will's once tightly managed public image. None of these extra claims are verified, yet in the court of public opinion they've gained traction, with fans on message boards and comment threads arguing over whether Denzel would ever be done with Will, a sentiment that has become the emotional hook powering the storyline far more than any actual legal findings. And that's how a rumored backstage disagreement gets inflated into talk of a larger cover-up, not through fact, but through the viral logic of rumor culture where speculation feels urgent, memes do the heavy lifting, and the narrative keeps growing because believers and skeptics can't stop debating it.
You know, and let me just say this. It's ridiculous.
The rumor cycle around Will Smith and Denzel Washington has accelerated at internet speed, with old clips of Denzel talking about grace and temptation being re-edited with dramatic music, lawsuit documents involving a touring musician being dissected on live streams, and unverified claims from a supposed former assistant spreading despite legal representatives calling them fabricated. An amplification loop that makes a story feel current and evolving even though much of it lives in speculation, and commentary rather than verified fact. In this vacuum, Denzel's lack of public statements about any alleged backstage confrontation has itself become fuel for Reddit threads, TikTok theories, and podcast speculation, as fans project meaning onto silence and frame it as evidence of guilt, betrayal, or a deeper unspoken rift. Meanwhile, Will's public denials of unrelated allegations are interpreted by a segment of the rumorosphere as defensive and therefore suspicious, illustrating how rumor culture can transform legal dismissals into subtext about hidden truths. The result is a gossip narrative where a real lawsuit filed by a touring musician becomes an anchored document. Social media layers on interpretations about personal conduct, and Denzel is roped in not for any legal role, but because the storyline imagines him as a respected figure who might have been misled, showing how each new clip, denial, meme, or legal filing gets absorbed into a larger saga the internet insists is still being written.
My feelings for him are just sadness. Like, I feel sorry for somebody who was a young man in a industry who I believe was completely violated and used by people without, his permission, and he had to just go with it because these were powerful men. And in doing so, he was promised more acting gigs, more career gigs, and none of that ever came. He was angry, upset, and it went down a very problematic route of substances, aggression, being charged, being arrested for bad things that he was.
What makes this whole saga so sticky for the rumor mill is the way real, documented events, like the Oscar slap and Denzel public response, plus actual legal filings and widely circulated assistant statements followed by legal denials, get blended with unverified claims that exist only in social commentary, including the alleged backstage fight between Denzel and Will that has zero official confirmation, yet is being repeated online as if it were fact. That mashup creates a shock factor, the idea that something massive is unfolding in real time, even though part of it is purely rumor. And the emotional reactions fueling it aren't neutral either. There's disbelief from those insisting Denzel would never, suspicion from others convinced something bigger is being hidden, a kind of poetic schadenfreude from people treating it as comic if true, and moralizing from those framing it as a fall from grace. That swirl of sentiment is exactly what keeps audiences clicking, reacting, and refreshing their feeds, transforming what could be a closed chapter into a narrative that feels ongoing rather than past.
Tim, I absolutely believe that Sean Diddy Combs would do things to Brashear Gray. I absolutely believe that Brashear Gray was violated by both of these men. That in itself is a believable narrative to me. Why? Because Brashear Gray right now is online on OnlyFans getting turned out by multiple men, creating this OnlyFans content, trying to create money from it, and etc. So I can even see that taking place. I can imagine somebody being taken advantage of when they're young, being essayed when they're young, and that in itself can lead to problematic, aggressive behaviors, which is why.
As the gossip web keeps mutating with fresh clips, claims, and denials ricocheting across social media, the online narrative refuses to die down, with fans convinced attention is still peaking and that whatever comes next, whether grounded in reality or pure sensationalism, will only intensify a storyline the internet treats as still unfolding. In this speculative version of events, the alleged Denzel outburst becomes more than a moment of anger and is instead framed as a cinematic realization scene, with anonymous insiders describing him as shaken rather than furious and whispering that something he supposedly saw or heard connected back to the wave of lawsuits and resurfaced assistant chatter, turning what once looked like random online meltdown fodder into a symbolic warning that prayer and discretion couldn't fix.
Legal steps, and nothing never happened. Because you know why? I responded to him. And I sent something to the bar letting them know that he told the lie. All right, so let's get off of that. Let's.
In classic Hollywood fashion, the internet framed the saga as a rapid-fire domino run, where one viral claim sparks another, and soon rumor begins masquerading as inevitability. First came the sensational podcast interview with a former assistant making explosive assertions that Will's team immediately labeled fabricated, yet the clip refused to vanish from feeds. Then came chatter about the violinist lawsuit, which social commentators reframed as proof of something bigger, even though legal filings only document workplace disputes. From there, gossip circles began stitching together timelines, whispering that Denzel's once unwavering faith and will have been cracking long before the alleged backstage confrontation, fueled by podcasts and rumor threads that tied Will to the wilder corners of celebrity nightlife, territory far from Denzel's public image built on faith, discipline, and legacy. And because rumor culture thrives on contrast, that perceived dissonance became the emotional hook. A story not just about a possible falling out, but about two men embodying different visions of Hollywood and what happens when those worlds collide.
On in the political world, but over here in the legal world, when it comes to the Hollywood industry and just actors and music in general, not even just in Hollywood in general, but an interview via Tasha K's channel from Bilal, who is, I believe, Will Smith's ex-best friend, has applied more pressure. And the man has come to bring in the conversation of Brashear Gray and how Brashear Gray was allegedly essayed by Will Smith from the back.